It is both an honor and a pleasure to introduce Tani Cantil-Sakauye, the 28th Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. Governor Schwarzenegger stated that nominating Chief Justice Cantil-Sakauye was one of the most important decisions he ever made in office, describing her as a fine public servant. In accepting the nomination, she personally expressed a commitment to being mindful of the public trust, and specifically to learn from the past, to address the immediate needs and the priorities of the present, and to plan and prepare for the future. For the past 11 years, she has earned that trust. She is tireless in her efforts to exceed the requisite duties of her position. She strenuously supports the judges and the courts, making sure necessary resources are available for courts to operate effectively and expeditiously. I have not spoken to a single judge in the state of California who has not had the opportunity to meet her or to hear her speak in person. As she is today, she is accessible and enthusiastic about promoting the judges and the courts. I tried initially to list her accomplishments, and we would be here all day. Summarizing them, we would be here at least half a day. So I chose one thing that, as a judge, in my humble personal opinion, that is perhaps her most extraordinary accomplishment. Many of you don't know, but her passion is for access to justice, and that passion is legendary amongst the courts and the judges. She has given that phrase meaning. It defines her vision. It has also become a goal that has been adopted by all courts, all judges, all court employees. And if you can get all those different people with their different preferences to get behind an idea, that is unheard of. Her philosophy has instilled in each of us a greater awareness of what we are doing in our professional lives, individually and collectively. It has unified all judges, and it serves as a constant reminder to each of us to strive harder, to remember that each case, each litigant, each victim, each witness deserves the ability to have access to justice. And with that, Justice Tani Cantil-Sakauye.
Good morning. I want to first thank CSUMB for offering us this forum, to thank Dr. Ochoa for his kind introduction, Dr. Gus for her enthusiasm and clear passion for teaching, and all of you students. And also to Presiding Judge Butler for that kind and generous introduction. And a special shout out to Judge Sam Lavarado for inspiring this outreach, and to all of the judges in the Monterey County courts because of the work they do every day to achieve justice for you, for your families, for your community, and for your future. I also want to say here today that I'm proud that it's Law Day, and I'm really excited, honestly, that it's about the Constitution, because all of us, judges, senators, assembly members, governors, presidents, congresspersons, we all raise our hand at the beginning of our administration and we swear the oath. And the oath of office for all of us is that we will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And enemies might be, you think of in terms of war, or you think in terms of other countries. But enemies of the Constitution can be laws that are unconstitutional. It can be oppression of people. It can be bias. It can be discrimination. It can be the elimination of rights. And judges who swear this oath in particular have to have the vision to be able to see that, apply the rule of law to ensure equity and fairness and equality in the application of law. And so today on Law Day, I thought I'd like to bring to life for you a little bit about the Constitution, because I am not a Constitution nerd, but my background, I'm the daughter of farm workers. I went to a community college, and if I were to trace back the abilities and the opportunities that I have had, it is because of our charter, the law that is embodied in the California Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. So well before the U.S. Constitution was even an idea, we were a subject of Britain, and we wanted to separate from this superpower because they were oppressing us, taxing us, not giving us our rights, as you well know. So first, well before the Constitution, came the Declaration of Independence. And as you may not know, if you signed the Declaration of Independence, it was a death warrant on your head. Because in those days, before we were a nation, before there was the Constitution, there was circulated a petition to see who would stand against Britain. Well, of the states that existed at the time, a third signed, a third said, no way, and the other third said, well, let's wait and see what happens to the third that signed. So creating this country was not a unanimous, rousing decision. It was one of concern and one of fear. Thereafter, after a war against the superpower by a ragtag team of farmers and workers and laborers and some statespersons, soldiers, we, against all odds, beat a superpower. This is if you took some country in some part of the world and it went up against Britain now. We didn't have in those days, in the 1700s, the kind of force and resources. In fact, the country, the United States as it was known then, went into deep debt over a war only to win the victory of being free. And once we were free, our framers said, now what do we do? Now what do we do? We are a country. And so the Constitution was created. The Constitution was created by farmers and scholars, regular people who thought that we do not need nor want a king, a lifetime king to rule us. We don't need royalty. Royalty is no better than we are. We need to be a beacon of hope as a country that shows that we can rule ourselves. We can create the more perfect union. The people can create the more perfect union. And so our framers, and there are approximately under 50 of them, they collectively decided to try to write a constitution. They borrowed from some of the colonies that had had charter documents. They also put most of the writing up to James Madison. But these were people who heavily edited each other's work. Think if you got together with 27 of your friends and you decided to create a club and you needed to create rules for the club. That's what was happening in the creation of this Constitution. It took many, many people, and some of them are known to you and they're famous to you. People like Benjamin Franklin, the oldest of the framers. This framer was a person who was basically a business person. He started post offices to make money. Then he franchised them and became rich. And then in his idle time decided that he would be a diplomat to France and to the United States to help create and edit the Constitution. The same is true, as you know, of Alexander Hamilton, who was the only framer who was non-white, who did not and was not born on U.S. soil. We also know across the board that these men had left their homes and put their businesses and their farms in the hands of their wives. So the first ladies, the first women, were also important because they did the work at home that allowed the men to go to the Continental Congress. And the Constitution itself was merely a negotiated document. They didn't sing praises. They didn't say it was great. At this point, it was like, well, this is good enough. Let's start. This is good enough. And then they took it to the to be ratified, as you know, to the then 13 states. And the 13 states said, no, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. We're not signing up for another Britain. We're not signing up for another big government to run us. We want certain rights. We want protections. We want protection from you, whatever you're going to be in the future. And so that's how the Bill of Rights came about. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution was sort of a negotiated deal. The states were not willing to sign off and ratify the Constitution until, in a negotiation, they got protection from it. That's why the First Amendment exists. And it's funny that it's the First Amendment. The First Amendment of the Bill of Rights to ratify the Constitution is freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, and that government not establish a religion that all of us have to be a part of. So if you look at the first 10 amendments that paved the way for the ratification of the Constitution, you will see that all of it was protection against government. All of it was basically anti-British oppression. So I tell you this background because who would know that after the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, that 234 years later, all of those framers would even think to know that North Salinas High School and Everett Alvarez High School and Monterey and the judges and the County Office of Education would be here to celebrate it. The founders didn't even know people like us. They never even saw people like us. Because the truth is, at least in those times, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, was written for propertied white men. That's just history. We can't do anything about that, but we've certainly evolved. But the point is the Constitution is a living thing. Look at it now. We're talking about toward a more perfect union. That's for us. We're talking about the Constitution in times of change. The Constitution is always changing, either by constitutional amendment, which doesn't happen very often, which is why we only have 27 amendments to the United States Constitution. But we have the changes in the Constitution through the interpretation by the courts, through the interpretation by the United States Supreme Court, the federal courts, and the state courts. And has already been mentioned, our California state constitution was inspired by the U.S. Constitution. And to make it really simple, just know this. The California Constitution contains every right, just about, that the United States Constitution has. So there's similar documents. But the California Constitution protects you even more. Protects you even more in California, because that's our right as a state towards the federal government that was written in the Bill of Rights to protect the states from federal government. So I tell you all this because absent the Constitution and absent the Bill of Rights and absent the case law that developed and absent, I would say, mentors and absent people who saw into the future, I would never be the Chief Justice of California. I'm the first non-white person as the Chief Justice of California. And California is 172 years old. So let me tell you that I may be the first, but I know definitely for certain I am not the last. And the second and third and fourth and fifth may be in this room. And I say that because where you are now and what you're learning from your teachers and the adults in your life who are trying to give you the foundation to make you better and stronger and just to learn and just to absorb are really priming you to be able to stick up for your own rights and the rights of others, to fully take advantage of your rights and your Constitution. And the judicial branch is here to ensure that the rights are evenly and equally applied. That's what we as judges do. That's what we have devoted our lives to. And all of us were previously lawyers. So in those days, we took sides as lawyers. And we sought to win for our side. But now that we're judges, we take no side. We stand on the side of the Constitution and the rule of law, and that is to protect and defend the Constitution and apply the law evenly and fairly to what? Provide a more perfect union. And a more perfect union means more equality. It also means a discussion of equity. But equity, which I translate as fairness, So equality is equal. That's pretty simple to decide. We have 100%. We have one pie. Equal means I get 50%, you get 50%. If there's 4 of us, right, we divide the pie. Equal is something we all conceptually understand and accept. But equity, which we hear more and more about today, is less about equality and more about fairness. And fairness is in the eye of the beholder. Fairness depends on the situation. And that's where judges make a decision based on multiple factors as to whether equity applies and to what extent equity should apply and for how long. And that's going to be a question for your generation and also for your future leaders in terms of how we move toward a more perfect union. Because moving toward a more perfect union nowadays is not just equality. It's more than that. And you're being taught that and you're learning that. And that's part of what we're doing here today. And before I conclude my formal remarks and provide hopefully some Q&A, I do want to do a shout out to many people. First, to Everett Alvarez for winning the 2020 Civics Excellence Award brought by the Judicial Council. To Gabriela Manzo from this area, who was our former champion of civics, and to Jennifer Elliman, who was her champion, by nominating her. Because we can all be champions of each other and sponsors of each other by supporting each other and by making sure that we can lift each other up where we can in order to provide a more perfect union, a more perfect environment, a more perfect life for you and success. So I thank you for the time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here at Law Day and to address all of you because you are the future. Thank you. So I heard that one of your instructors talked about preparing questions for me. I don't know what those questions are, but I'll do my best to answer them if you would like to start that portion.
Good morning, Chief Justice. My name is Juana Gomez.
Wave to me, where are you?
From North Salinas High School.
Hi, good morning.
And my question for you is, what was the most important thing that helped you become a judge?
Thank you. What was the most important thing that helped me become a judge? My mother. And I say that with all honesty. My mother had a high school education, and she was a farm worker. And we were part of the Filipino community. And she took me to see the first ever female lawyer that the community had ever heard of. So all of us gathered in Sacramento at a hall, and we were in the audience. And this female lawyer, her name was Gloria Ochoa, Manigno Ochoa, came to speak to us. And we had never seen any Filipina with so much education in our community. And I was sitting with my mother, and she elbowed me really hard, and she said, "You could do that." And I didn't know what it was, but I remember how much my mother thought that that was important. And, you know, our parents are our earliest influencers, and they never leave our head. And so for me, the first thought of ever becoming a lawyer was my mother, who also had lots of other ideas, but that idea was the first one that got me thinking about the law and justice. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chief Justice. My name is Maya Barba from Everett Alvarez High School, and my question for you is, have you experienced any challenges trying to get to where you're at, especially as a woman of color?
Thank you. Have I experienced any challenges to get where I am as a woman of color, a person of color? I'll say absolutely. I have faced challenges not only as a woman, but also as an Asian woman, and also as being sort of small compared to everyone else size-wise in the courtroom. And you know, being a person of color was also, I looked younger in the old days than what I really was. So everywhere I went as a young lawyer, I was asked, would you file this? Would you go get me a cup of coffee? What grade are you in? What college are you going to? When are you going to pass the bar? And by this time, I was at least 7 years in as a lawyer. So I had challenges too early on because I became a lawyer in 1984 and I was a prosecutor, so I was doing trials. And I would work primarily against male defense attorneys, and male defense attorneys would always interrupt me and always talk over me. And so pretty soon I learned that I had to interrupt them and yell at them, and then pretty soon they stopped doing it. And then pretty soon judges would call for greater order in the courtroom because two lawyers are yelling at each other. So I will say that was not my upbringing. I grew up in a large Filipino family and I was the youngest, and I hardly ever argued with anyone and I hardly ever fought with anyone, and so I wasn't exactly had the skills to be in a courtroom, but I learned them very quickly, and I learned that there are abilities you have yet that you don't even know about because you haven't had to use them. But yes, there are challenges. Even today, I travel pretty extensively and I travel nationally, and other states are just not used to seeing a small Asian woman in charge of California's judiciary, and there are strange challenges, and in the beginning too, people would not call me the Chief Justice, they would just call me the lady. So you do it with a sense of humor, and you try to learn a lesson, and you try not to become angry or bitter, because if you are angry or bitter, what's the saying? You're taking the poison, but you're hoping someone else will die. So there's no reason to pollute yourself with those ill feelings because you're only going to hurt yourself. So try to have some humor, learn from it, and try to share it with good people who will make you forget it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chief Justice. My name is Kaylee Perez, and I'm from North Salinas High School. And my question for you is, with the knowledge that you have now, as you look back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Thank you. What advice would I give to my younger self? I would say this, and that is, don't feel overly pressurized. Don't feel overly pressed to accomplish great things and fantastic things at your age. But I would say do this, build your brand. And that is, only you can make the best you. And so that means read, listen to your teachers, try new things, read current events, read several descriptions of the current event so you can have your own opinion. Learn to be your own thinker. Learn to have your own opinion. Don't just accept what people tell you. Become a critical thinker. I would also say, too, that there will be hard times, and the best you can do about a hard time is to get through it and then look back and find the greatest parts of it that make you better and flush the rest. Because you're in charge of you, and don't let other people take that power from you. So you need to build the best you, and you can learn from others, but remember your goal is to build the best you. So that means absorbing information, listening to other people, trying new things when you can in your time, learning as much as you can, even about the strangest, most arcane things. You'd be surprised. And take jobs, because no job is without honor, and learn the best from it. And I give you an example. I waited tables all through college, and I waited tables at night. And I learned that people are really irritable and demanding and a little irrational. And I learned that when they're angry at me, they don't know me. How can they be angry at me? So I just learned to tolerate bad behavior because it's not personal and because you get better at it. And then later on, I learned as a lawyer and as a judge that really helps to tolerate bad behavior because you see a lot of it. Because in a courthouse, in a courtroom, the people who are the sides, the parties in front of you are in conflict. They have a problem, and they want you to solve it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. So I think you need to build your foundation, and you need to look for positives from what you can learn from difficult challenges.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello and good morning, Chief Justice. My name is Knox and I'm from North Salinas High School. My question is, what does a more perfect union mean to you?
Thank you. I love that question too. What does a more perfect union mean to me? Well, first I would say it's aspirational, meaning I don't think we'll ever get to perfect. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to strive for perfection. And that means doing good things, bringing people along, making the world better, even our own little worlds that might exist in our home, in our bedroom, in our backyard, making it better to the best that we can. And I think the union part means moving toward a more perfect union is understanding how diverse we are, understanding how we should celebrate our differences instead of tolerate them. I also really marvel at the fact that the United States is the only country in the world that is as diverse as we are. And I think that's a strength to our union because we learn more about each other. We begin to appreciate and understand history. We become more compassionate. We can find new hobbies. So I tend to think moving toward a more perfect union is understanding that there'll always be work to do. We can always be better. We can always get to perfect or strive for it. And a union means a union. If we founded this country on the belief that everyone here is welcome and that we have opportunities, then I think the union part means let's stop othering each other. Let's start appreciating each other.